I'm Jane Messinio Lindquist, and this is a Puppy Culture Potluck podcast. You bring the topics, we bring the conversation. Well, today's topic is on raw feeding. So here's the question. I'm wondering if you could make an episode on feeding dogs raw food. We plan to feed our pup raw. The breeder currently feeds raw, but it's a bit intimidating for people who are new to this diet. I'm wondering if you could cover a few things. Number 1, the science behind it and health benefits. Number 2, why you feed raw and how long you've been feeding raw. Number 3, the dangers of feeding raw and how to avoid these dangers. For instance, proper practices for purchasing, handling, and feeding raw. Number 4, any challenges you've experienced or seen with feeding raw. Number 5, tips for starting raw diets, where to begin. Number 6, whether the meat has to be a certain quality and where to purchase ingredients for homemade raw. I've heard that grocery store meats aren't safe because of their allotted salmonella and bacterial thresholds. Number 7, how to handle raw treats, bones with raw meat. Do you have to clean up bedding, etc., every time the raw treats come in contact with it? Do you have to wipe down your pup's face and paws after contact? Number 8. I would love it if you would share some recipes for homemade raw food or other resources, recipe books on feeding raw. Number 9, whether puppies need special recipes or if they can eat the same recipes as adult dogs. I know a lot of this is Googleable, LOL, but I found that there's a lot of fear-mongering around feeding raw, both from owners and vets, so I wanted to reach out and see what your thoughts are. Thank you so much. Appreciate any wisdom you can share on these topics. Okay, well, what those questions are more of an outline for a course on canine nutrition than a podcast. So I'm not going to be able to tackle in detail every single thing that she asked about. But I am going to riff on these questions because I have a lot to say about the topic in general. And I'm going to break it into parts, at least 2, maybe 3, because this is definitely going to run long. I also want to say at the outset, if you're a die-hard kibble feeder, you may not like the first part of this, but I encourage you to listen on because this is not a kibble bashing podcast, and I am going to lay out the case for kibble as well. So, first question, how long have we been feeding raw and why do we feed raw? I have been feeding my dogs raw since 1998, and we are currently on our 9th generation of raw-fed dogs. And we've had multiple litters across generations, so a lot of dogs for a lot of years, about 26, 27 years. We wean our puppies onto raw, and they continue with raw as long as they're with us. Most of our puppy owners do continue with raw as well. Our dogs are relatively very healthy for the breed. They live much longer than the average for the breed, and most importantly to us, they remain vibrant and puppy-like well into their senior years. We have never had an adverse event related to raw feeding of any kind, either for the dogs or for us. So for what it's worth, our dogs are a living testament to the fact that a raw diet is a healthy option for your pet. As to why initially I started with raw, it was because it made sense to me to feed my dogs what they're designed to eat. I grew up in a family where every meal was made from fresh ingredients, and to this day, I prepare 3 meals a day for my family. It's not some kind of food tribe identification. It's just that I grew up in a family where people made food for themselves. My grandparents brought it from the old country, and somehow we just never lost that. When I do eat any kind of prepared food, I immediately feel worse. So that also reinforces my behavior of sticking to making fresh food from fresh ingredients. I tend to go to the local farm stand and use whatever's there. We are also fortunate enough to live in an area where local farmers and fishermen sell their freezer meat and fish at local farm stands. So that's pretty much all we eat. Local, seasonal meats and vegetables from the local farm stand. You know, nowadays, if you eat and cook like we do, you will be labeled a localvore or a seasonalvore or a slow foods movement person. But honestly, it's just food, not an identity. And it's so strange to me and frankly concerning to me that people find this exceptional. So circling back to the dogs, it just would have been weird for me to feed my dogs processed food. The idea that it would be somehow healthy is akin to thinking that, quote, healthy choice, unquote, frozen food would be somehow more healthy than roast chicken and vegetables that I prepared myself. And the wisdom of that feeding model has been borne out for us over the generations with the health and longevity of our dogs. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which is, what is the science behind raw feeding? And I have to say, I always find this question amusing. Because domestic dogs have been eating raw for somewhere between 30 and 40,000 years and thriving. And wild canids have been eating raw for, let's say, 37 to 40 million years, and they got by just fine. Commercial dog food was not even an option until 1860, and not popularized until maybe 80 years ago. It is the most bizarro logic that the question always seems to be, what is the science behind feeding raw? I mean, the science is that's what dogs eat. Somehow all those canids for 37 million years got by until kennel ration arrived on the scene. It should be assumed that raw food is good for your dog. The question should really be, how is it possible for dogs to survive on highly processed food without any variety or fresh ingredients? I mean, if someone said, you have a choice, you could live on processed food in a tube, the same exact ingredients and flavor every day of your life, or you could eat a diet of prepared fresh fruits and vegetables, meat and fish. What person, given that choice, is going to say, yeah, tell me more about the science behind this fresh food thing. I'm not sure I trust it. Any normal person would ask, how is it possible to live on food in a tube? Because it defies common sense. But that's the power of marketing. It has literally changed the sensibilities of humans and convinced us, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, that we are incapable of feeding our dogs without a commercially prepared diet. Now, listen. The science behind dog nutrition is fascinating, but way beyond the scope of this podcast. I recommend Dr. Ian Billinghurst's book, Give Your Dog a Bone, as the best basic treatise on raw feeding, the science behind it, and the benefits. If you want to get started, that is the most approachable, least intimidating, most common sense book written by a veterinarian that's out there. But you know what? You really don't need to know the science behind raw feeding to know it's a healthy way to feed your dog, because you've got 30,000 years plus my personal 26 to 27 years that says raw feeding is a healthy option. Okay, let's move on to health benefits. As the original poster pointed out, there is a truly overwhelming amount that's been written about the health benefits of feeding raw. And again, I do think that Billinghurst's book lays it out pretty well. And I don't need to add to any of that. So I'm only going to speak to the health benefits that we have observed in our own dogs over the generations. These are pretty subjective observations, but the question is directed to me, so I'm sharing my perceptions. Take them for what they're worth. I spoke in general previously about the health and longevity of my dogs, but to put it in context, a 9-year-old bull terrier is often, frankly, quite old. I judge bull terriers quite a bit. I judge veterans quite a bit, and I'm often shocked at how old 9-year-old dogs are. Our dogs are still running agility at 9 years old, sometimes into 10 years old. Also, our dogs do not smell like dogs. You can put your nose into the fur of any of our dogs, and they smell sweet like a horse, not doggy. You can run your hands over our dogs and pat them, and your hands will come away clean. We almost never bathe our dogs. The only time they get a bath is if they're going to a show or they got into something really nasty. And they absolutely do not smell, and they feel clean to the touch. Our dogs almost never have any kind of digestive upset. Our puppies transition to their new homes with zero stomach upset. Neither travel, nor routine changes, nor diet changes seem to affect our dogs. We do vary their diet quite a bit, and even if we throw in the occasional meal of kibble or cooked food, they handle it just fine. Their stool volume is a small fraction of the stool volume that a kibble-fed dog produces. And the stool itself breaks down into a white, chalky substance if we miss picking it up. Once you get used to those clean, neat, raw food poops, the big, greasy kibble poops are disturbing. So vibrant health, appealing body condition and odor, youthfulness into old age, long life. In 26 years of raw feeding, I have yet to see any health downside whatsoever. Okay, kibble feeders, now if I haven't lost you already, here we go. I have a saying that our ability as a civilization to keep dogs is based on 3 things. Number 1, they sleep 20 hours a day. Number 2, they can hold their bladder and bowels for 8 hours. And number 3, the existence of the dog food industry. And I say that because prior to dog food being commercially available and affordable, dogs really were not kept so much as pets by middle-class people. Not in the same way that we do now. I would venture to say that the initial obstacle for most middle-class people, and I'm going back to Victorian times, when the dog food industry began, that initial obstacle was probably more financial than anything else. But then, as the generations went by, we also lost our ability to prepare food. I mean, people literally don't have the skills to prepare food. So having to prepare food for a dog now becomes an enormous chore that many people just lack the skill and confidence to carry out. So there's this sizable cross-section of the population that lacks the time, money, and ability to put together a nutritionally viable diet for their dogs, and kibble is the answer for them. They simply could not have a dog if they had to prepare food for the dog themselves. I do feel that people who get on a high horse about feeding raw are a bit like rich people who fill up their shopping carts with grass-fed beef and organic vegetables, and then look down their noses at people who are filling up their shopping carts with boxes of Kraft macaroni and cheese or Hamburger Helper. Usually when someone's filling up their cart with those kinds of processed foods, it's because either they're less affluent, they're working longer hours or multiple jobs, have larger families, or are culturally disadvantaged because they never had a person in their life teach them how to prepare food. If you have the money, time, and knowledge to feed your family fresh, organic food, you are not morally superior. You are super fortunate. And the same thing goes for feeding dogs. So let me drill down a little into what it really takes to feed raw. I would say many of these requirements would qualify as what she asked about, which are challenges of feeding raw. The easiest way to get started is to begin with a commercial raw mix. Yes, there are pet food companies that make complete nutrition dog food that's raw. However, we also prepare food from scratch 3 meals a day at our house, and we have a vegetable garden and also fruit trees on our property. I make my own fermented vegetables, I make my own yogurt and kefir. We have access to pasture-raised eggs. My sister has chickens. Right down the street, we can get raw goat milk and raw cow milk. So we use the raw mix as a base and then just rotate our add-ons based on whatever's in the house that day. Or, for that matter, what's in the yard under the fruit trees or in the vegetable garden. Our dogs forage a lot. If you are not the kind of person who cooks from scratch every day, you won't have all those nice add-ons handy. So, yes, your dog can just get by on the raw mixes, but optimally, you'll be throwing some extra fermented foods and a variety of add-ons into their dishes that you'll have to go to the store and get. Let me just say, this is not a cheap proposition. Unless you live right near to where the raw food companies are, the shipping is crazy expensive. And you also need a huge freezer to store the raw food in, and you have to pay for electricity to keep it frozen. So it adds up. You can definitely do this much more cheaply by buying the ingredients and divvying it up into portions. But that is an intensely time-consuming pastime, especially if you want to grind the food first to avoid any choking hazard. And then you're going to have some knowledge about balancing nutrients, and that can quickly become an atomic vortex of fussiness. Seriously, when you join some raw feeding groups, it becomes incomprehensible how anyone can accomplish feeding their dog. They will quibble about 1% more or less of an ingredient, fire off at each other about the amount of secreting organ versus muscle meat. There are several different feeding models. It's crazy. But I just don't think it really has to be that difficult. At one time, I belonged to a co-op that sourced chicken as a base for raw feeding. And then I used to go meet a truck on the New Jersey Turnpike once every few months and get some pre-made raw mixes. And I also went to a meat packing plant in New Jersey that sold dog food, and beef ends that they ground up for dog food. It was worth it to me, but the fact remains, it was a lot of work, and it's not for everyone. For what it's worth, my dogs got by at one point in my life extremely well on a diet of mostly chicken necks with the occasional alternate protein whenever I had a chance to get it, and whatever kitchen scraps I had each day. But it was mostly chicken necks. I do think they do much better on the commercial balanced mix that we use now, but they did pretty darn good for about a decade on chicken necks, beef, and tripe from the butcher, and some kitchen scraps. And no, I didn't measure anything. They got whatever I had on hand. I'm not advocating that diet. I'm just saying that if you're in a group and you're starting to freak out because you're seeing, what looks like a Michelin-starred restaurant offering for each dog every day, and people are arguing about percentages and ratios, trust me, it doesn't have to be that hard. Don't be intimidated. Again, if you want a nice, approachable entree into feeding raw and preparing it yourself, you can't go wrong with Dr. Billinghurst's book, Give Your Dog a Bone. It's approachable, easy to follow, but be aware that it does involve more than opening a bag of food, and that's not for everyone, which is fine. This is a no judgment zone. Okay, well, I feel like that got us started on this topic, so I'm going to leave it here. But next time, we're going to pick up with AVCO and what complete and balanced really means. If you liked this podcast, you'll love our puppy course, available at madcapuniversity.com. Breeders, we have a course for you too at madcapuniversity.com. Are you new to puppy culture and just want to get acquainted? Check out our Get Started bundles for breeders and Get Started bundles for puppy owners at puppyculture.com. Well, that's it for this time. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.